Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Falcoholic Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, here to bring you a full Falcons free agency primer for free agency, which by the time you're listening to this on Monday, will be right around the corner, as legal tampering will start, I believe, at 4 p.m. on Monday. There will be 2 days of that legal tampering period prior to free agency officially kicking off on Wednesday at 4 p.m. It's going to be a wild time. I will actually be on vacation as spring break happens to fall right in the middle of free agency once again. Some years I'm lucky, some years I'm not, but don't worry. Everyone at thefalcoholic.com will be there to take care of the breaking news and all of that good stuff. We will also, of course, have a Falcoholic live show on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern to cover the initial signings that come out of free agency. And the Falcons are likely to be pretty active early on. We may hear a lot of buzz during the legal tampering period if they're going after any of these big name free agents who frequently do have deals in place right at the start of free agency at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. So a lot to monitor, a lot to watch, and a lot to look forward to this year finally for the Falcons that do have some cap space to play around with for the first time in recent memory, right? You may remember my cap article from earlier in the year, and things are pretty much on track for those projections right at this very moment, taking into account the cut of Marcus Mariota, which was expected, and the re-signings of several players. We'll just cover those real quick. The Falcons did re-sign Lorenzo Carter earlier last week for a contract that averages about $4.5 million per year. They also re-signed a few of their exclusive rights free agents: Parker Hesse, the tight end, Liam McCullough, the long snapper, and Tyler Vrabel, the offensive tackle, from training camp. These were guys that were on the practice squad that they just gave new contracts to, picked up their ERFA options. So those are the initial guys that were brought back. So with the cut of Marcus Mariota and those signings, the Falcons are sitting at $62.9 million in cap space. The effective number, of course, is a little bit lower, and the effective number, of course, takes into account the cost to sign the draft class, which is about $4 to $5 million, depending on where the picks actually fall. So the Falcons, at worst, are working with an effective number of around $58 million. They could still clear a little bit more space with cuts, with the cut of Casey Hayward. That would save them $5.5 million. That hasn't happened as of the time I'm recording this. But it could easily happen at any time before the pod even airs, or before free agency kicks off, or it could happen later in the process if they end up needing the money. So that is one to monitor. Other than that, though, there aren't a ton of ways the Falcons can create additional cap. There are a few guys on the final year of their rookie contract. Matt Hennessy, Michael Walker, and Jalen Hawkins are all could all be cut for about $2.7 million in savings. Those are the only guys really that provide much of anything. There's a few guys that maybe get $1 million here and there, but for a team like the Falcons, who is working with this much cap space, they're already at 59 players under contract. There's not really going to be a lot of need to clear additional space unless they get really wild with some of these deals and they're starting to actually run low. So there isn't a need for them to make any additional moves. They may be able to if they want to or feel led to or whatever, but they don't really need to. Now, before we actually get to free agency itself and what we're going to spend most of this show talking about to get ready for free agency, right, priming you guys, is the guys that the Falcons have yet to re-sign, because these are the players the Falcons can sign at any time. They can re-sign any of these guys on the list that I'm about to show you, which we'll go ahead and pull up now. They can re-sign these pending free agents at any time. They could re-sign them right now when I'm recording this show on Friday. They could re-sign them over the weekend. They could re-sign them on Monday. They could sign them during legal tampering. They could sign them after free agency starts. It doesn't matter. Since they last were with the Falcons have the ability to sign them early. They're not considered, free, like on the market free agents until 4 p.m. on Wednesday. They are considered still part of the Falcons. The Falcons can talk to them, sign them, whatever. So that gives you a little bit of an edge with your own free agents to be able to re-sign them, because you can negotiate before anyone else gets a chance. We saw them already do this with Lorenzo Carter, who was on this list obviously, before that signing happened. There are a number of guys that we'll get to. Starting at the top, we'll go ahead and we'll come back to Chris Lindstrom. First, I want to talk about Caleb McGarry, who I was expecting them to tag potentially. They did not. And there really hasn't been any buzz at all about McGarry returning to the Falcons or any sort of negotiating now. That's not entirely surprising because the Falcons are pretty tight-lipped about this stuff in general, so we may never hear anything until the deal is done or not. But I do expect McGarry to be asking for something in the range of $17 million a year. That, considering the Falcons weren't willing to give him the $18 million tag, it seems like that number is probably going to be too high for them. And they may be comfortable letting him leave in free agency. So that would be sort of a little bit unexpected, but in the grand scheme, not a crisis. They still have free agency to sign another tackle potentially. They could also, talk about some of the other guys further down the list that we're going to get to that could potentially come in and be a spot starter if necessary. But if McGarry does not come back, that is a large hole on the offensive line that you didn't have before. It could prompt them to do like what I did in my most recent mock draft, which came out on Friday, and take an offensive tackle at 8. I think the value in that pick will be good. So they could go in a lot of different directions there, but McGarry is probably the biggest impending free agent without a doubt in terms of contract and importance to the team, and that will be one to monitor up until Wednesday at 4. And, we may hear something before then if it's out there that he's negotiating with a bunch of other teams and the Falcons aren't involved. But for now, that's the biggest domino still to fall. Chris Lindstrom, he's on his 5th-year option. He's not technically a free agent. I did want to add him here because I believe the Falcons are probably going to work out some sort of extension with Lindstrom this season. He could always play on the 5th-year option. It's about $13 million. So the Falcons could extend him and front load that and raise his cap hit this year and pay some of that money now. They could also extend him and lower that first-year cap hit if they needed additional money for other signings. So it's really up to them. They're very flexible because they have so much cap space to do whatever they want with Lindstrom's contract. But at some point this offseason, before the season starts, I would expect Chris Lindstrom to get an extension. The next biggest guys, you can see that there's not really a lot of other premium free agents on the list for the Falcons. There are definitely a number of guys. Pretty much everyone on this list I would strongly consider re-signing. Alameda Zaccheaus is probably going to be the most expensive one. I think Spotrac has his market value at like $3.8 million, so somewhere in that $4 million a year range. The team really likes him. He gives a lot of effort as a blocker. He can play outside or in the slot. He didn't seem to have quite the same connection with Desmond Ridder as he did with Marcus Mariota, so maybe there's a little bit, of a reason there why he might not come back. But again, it was only 4 games. There wasn't really a lot of opportunity for Ridder to build chemistry with a lot of guys, to be honest. So I wouldn't really think about that too much, but he's definitely one of the bigger names to watch in terms of re-signing. Linebacker Rashaan Evans is another big one that I'm pretty convinced is not coming back now. I do think if Dean Pease was returning that he would have already been re-signed, Rashaan Evans. He and Dean Pease just seem to get each other. Whenever Rashaan Evans is with Dean Pease in a Dean Pease defense, I think he's a good linebacker. Whenever he hasn't been with Dean Pease, it's not been very good. So to me, I'm thinking that the Falcons are probably comfortable letting him walk. But we'll see if he does return. Certainly as a depth option wouldn't be the worst idea either. But I don't know if they will, prioritize getting a more expensive free agent linebacker or, going with young players or whatever at that position. One of the biggest, most key free agent re-signings, in my opinion, is tight end Michael Pruitt. I would definitely open up the pocketbook for him, even if he's asking for more than this $3 million estimate that I have here. I mean, I would probably pay Pruitt, $4 million if he asked for it. I do think that he's a very good fit for this offense. He's a very good, reliable tight end too that can block and showed some really good chemistry with Desmond Ridder. So I would not hesitate at all. I would bring back Michael Pruitt to be there alongside Kyle Pitts and give the Falcons that second tight end. Because like I mentioned in an earlier show, the Falcons, both Parker Hesse, who is also returning on that ERFA, exclusive rights free agent tender, Michael Pruitt and Parker Hesse both had more snaps played than the third receiver, which was Damiere Byrd. So that those tight ends are going to play a lot and a lot more than in any other scheme, basically. So it's a very valuable position for the Falcons that a lot of teams tend to go cheap at. I don't know that the Falcons will. I think that they should prioritize it and bring back a good player that they have in-house and that has that existing chemistry with Ritter. Punter Bradley Pinion, thought he had a very good year. He's about the same age as Younghoe Koo. I would just bring him back, pay him a good punter contract and have that part of your team settled. They brought back Liam McCullough, the long snapper, too. I was happy for him. He finally got a chance to actually, snap for a team. And he made the most of it. And I have no qualms whatsoever with Liam McCullough. And I think you bring back Pinion and you have Koo and you're set. You're all set with those three, hopefully, for the foreseeable future. Another one of the big defenders on the list is cornerback Isaiah Oliver, who didn't play as well as maybe some were hoping for, at the early part, like last year, 2021, before he got hurt. He was playing at such a high level. Didn't quite replicate that this year, but he did still show his ability as a tackler, as a blitzer, and, was a solid cover corner in the slot. Definitely the best one they had when he was healthy. So he could return as well on a pretty reasonable deal. One of the more interesting offensive ones is these next two offensive linemen. Elijah Wilkinson was the starting left guard for the Falcons. I thought he actually looked pretty good. He was definitely the pass protector at left guard. And look, if he's cheap again, I would definitely bring him back. He definitely had to deal with some injuries. And that was unfortunate, but I think Wilkinson, when he was in there, was a capable left guard. I would just bring him back and feel, decently confident in that spot. Not that they can't try to find an upgrade in the draft or see if they can develop somebody too, but I think he was absolutely fine there and it's not going to be overly expensive. And then at tackle, Jermaine Ifedi, this was a guy that many thought might challenge McGarry in camp, myself included. McGarry did do a good job at fending him off and held on to that. Held on to the right tackle spot to such a strong degree that he played 100% of the offensive snaps. So good for McGarry, but we didn't really get a chance to see Ifedi. So I don't know if it's like he just didn't get a chance to play because both Matthews and McGarry basically didn't miss any time. So there wasn't really ever a need for Ifedi to get on the field. He is just 29, 1 year older than Caleb McGarry, and has historically been a solid starting tackle. Solid pass protector, below average run blocker. But look, I mean, I think if you had to start Ifedi, it wouldn't be catastrophic. It wouldn't be great, certainly. But I think you at least bring back Ifedi if you don't have a Caleb McGarry or a big-time free agent coming in. And then you don't go into the draft desperate necessarily for a tackle at 8. I think you probably are still wanting one there. But you could then wait maybe until 44, the second round, where there's likely to be some very good tackles on the board too. So that would give you some flexibility. I thought, he made a lot of sense here. We'll see if the Falcons do bring him back, but he won't be very expensive. Then there's just a list of these sort of depth guys that I think, Keith Smith, the fullback, technically a starter, right? Also a really good special teamer. He's getting up there. He played 31 in 2023, but shouldn't be overly expensive. Clearly, and the Falcons do use a fullback, at a fairly high rate. I think it was like, 20% of snaps or something like that. They use multiple running backs more than that, but they weren't necessarily playing fullback. Defensive tackle Abdullah Anderson sort of came on out of nowhere as sort of just a guy they picked up off the street. And I thought, played pretty well as like a reserve tackle. So I wouldn't hesitate to bring Anderson back on an affordable deal to give them that depth. If they do end up bringing in like multiple starting free agents on the defensive line and draft somebody, that he might be, sort of on the outside looking in when it comes down to roster cut downs, but I would still bring him back as that reliable, like 4th, 5th guy in the rotation. He's not going to be expensive. Might as well keep him around. And if you happen to get lucky enough to replace all these guys, with like better starters and guys in the draft, then, he could go elsewhere still, but I would probably re-sign him just to bolster that depth until we know for sure who else is going to be coming in here. Mike Ford at corner, on defense wasn't really very inspiring, but one of the best special teamers on the team. And I think Marquise Williams raved about him. He definitely played really hard on special teams and wasn't necessarily like a terrible defensive player. not high end, not a guy you really want starting ever, but he can play inside and out. He's a good like fifth, sixth corner that can take some snaps for you in a pinch, not be a complete disaster, and is going to play a lot on special teams, and that's nothing wrong with that. Two receivers that I would probably bring back because I don't think they'll be expensive. Kadero Hodge, not someone that's going to move the needle for your passing game. He is a serviceable wide receiver. He can absolutely come in, run some routes, and catch a few passes here and there. It's not like he's a poor receiver. He's not a difference maker as a receiver, but as a special teamer, he is very, very good, very reliable. He blocks well in the run game. So I would definitely bring back Kadero Hodge. He would be my biggest priority from these like cheaper guys in terms of importance to special teams, and I think he's a solid offensive player too. If they don't, they could bring back Damiere Byrd too. I don't really have any reason why I would just not throw, $1.5 million at him, and get him back in here. And, maybe the Falcons do get another bigger receiver in free agency, or they get someone in the draft. And then Damiere Byrd maybe has to fight for that roster spot, but I think he was solid. He was the wide receiver 3 last year. Not really a needle mover, but as someone who can take the top off a defense and give you some plus plays as a deep threat, I think you could do a lot worse than Byrd. I wouldn't mind him having, being there to sort of fill out the depth chart and give them another speed option. And then finally, Colby Gossett, the interior offensive lineman. He was basically their second string guard, and I liked it. I thought he was fine. He unfortunately also dealt with injuries, but I thought Gossett was solid as a reserve offensive lineman. Not going to be expensive at all. Can play both left and right guard, and I would take him back. And it's again, this is maybe somebody that if they draft somebody that might be on the outside looking in, but you can never have too many good offensive linemen in training camp. You never know what's going to happen. I would bring him back on a cheap deal. But these are the biggest free agents. They do have some other ones. I don't think many of the other ones are going to move the needle for anyone. Going down the list here. Eric Harris is out there, but it doesn't seem like he's probably in their plans with the new secondary coach and everything coming in. Vincent Taylor, I was pretty excited for Vincent Taylor. He did, have a season-ending injury in camp and has unfortunately dealt with that many of the last few years, but I don't, maybe the team is willing to see if he's healthy now, see what they can get there, have him into camp. I wouldn't have a problem with that. Jaleel Johnson ended up playing sort of a depth role. Maybe he comes back to camp. Nick Kwiatkowski didn't end up playing any snaps on defense, which is kind of crazy because when he was signed, I think some people thought he would be a starter. Anthony Ferkser just didn't really get a chance to play after having a sizable role in Arthur Smith offense previously. I think he was pretty soundly upstaged by Parker Hesse as a blocker and Michael Pruitt as a receiver. Just didn't really find a lot of snaps there. Matt Dickerson never really got that pickup to begin with, so doesn't seem like he's going to be coming back. Cornell Armstrong is another one. He ended up playing like 30% of the snaps at corner. Again, with the new secondary coach and new defensive coordinator coming in, I don't know if they'll necessarily feel attached to him, but, we'll see. And then Rashad Fenton, traded for him, didn't really get anything out of him. Seems like he's probably going to walk. So not a whole lot else. I guess Chuma Edoga is another guy. Didn't really play a lot. I don't think they're going to necessarily be running out to re-sign him. Bo Brinkley, the long snapper, veteran. He was expected to be the long snapper, but hurt himself prior to camp. And then Liam McCullough came in, and I think, they're going to probably end up going with McCullough, who's just 26. So, have that long-term long snapper in here and go from there. That's pretty much the situation in terms of the re-signings for the Falcons. Those are the names that you should be looking to see who they decide to bring back over the next few days, right? After that point, we should know, like, if they don't bother re-signing any of these guys prior to Wednesday, that means they're comfortable with them at least testing the market. Some of them still may return later. But at this point, I do expect we will probably see 4, maybe 5 of these guys come back prior to free agency starting. The rest, the Falcons might sort of let test the market. But I'm expecting, like, right off the top of my head, Zacchaeus, Michael Pruitt, Pinion, Elijah Wilkinson, Ifedi, and then probably like Mike Ford and Kadarius Hodge. So I think that was like 6 or 7. I would probably just re-sign all those guys prior to free agency and just bring them back. But we'll see. We'll see who they like to sign from this group, who they go elsewhere for. They do have the money now, so they're not necessarily tied to just re-signing their own guys at a low price. They can go get pretty much anyone they want, assuming they want to come to Atlanta. But yeah, guys, I hope this is a decent help. You're armed with the knowledge of about how much salary cap space they have, roughly $63 million, give or take. And they do have, they're already at the top 51 rule. So for those that don't know what that means, when they sign a player, if that player's salary is higher than the 51st most expensive contract, then they subtract that contract from the price. So right now, anyone they sign that's going to be getting more than $750,000, which would be pretty much anyone, you would have $750,000 subtracted from that cap hit to that signing. So a lot of these cheap signings that I'm talking about, these million level guys, they're only going to count a few $100,000 against the cap. So the Falcons really shouldn't hesitate to bring in a bunch of these guys if they want to, because it won't really affect their ability to sign any premium free agents at this point. But yeah, free agency is almost here. It's an exciting time. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to Wednesday night with all you guys. Hopefully we'll have some fun stuff to talk about. It may not be done yet. There may be a lot of buzz about who they're negotiating with. It may not be finished. So I wouldn't panic if they haven't closed the deal with anyone by the time we go live on Wednesday. But, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Finally have some money. I expect the Falcons to be connected to a lot of guys. There's probably going to be a lot of buzz. Some of it may not be true, as always. So take what you read with a grain of salt, unless it's coming from multiple national sources. And stick to thefalcoholic.com. We're not going to report anything that we don't have a solid lead on. That's sort of, you guys can trust our reporting. We're not going to report on it unless we've, more or less gotten some kind of confirmation from multiple sources that it is legitimate, or at least a strong rumor, enough of a rumor to comment on. So stay tuned there. And thanks for watching the Falcoholic Podcast today with me, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin. If you're watching on video, please do like and subscribe. Those numbers really help us out. Click that little, bell icon or whatever it is on YouTube. Get the notifications when we go live and have a new episode dropping. You can also join the community Discord. The link is in the show description. It's also popped up on the screen throughout the show here. If you're listening to the audio version, leave us that 5-star review. Really helps us out. Appreciate that. And if you're interested in supporting the show, we obviously really appreciate that. You can do so at patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, excuse me. And we have several tiers there. They all get you access to ad-free versions of the podcast, usually a day or two early as well. And also access to some exclusive Q&A sessions with myself and other folks from the Falcoholic. And of course, you get our eternal gratitude, which is priceless. So thanks again for everyone who's supporting us there. We really appreciate you guys. So enjoy the next couple days of the free agency frenzy before things kick off on Wednesday. We will see you again on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern for the Falcoholic Live. Until then, guys, have a great day.